Live from Las Vegas, it's theCUBE, covering Dell EMC World 2017. Brought to you by Dell EMC.
Okay, welcome back everyone. We are here live in Las Vegas. This is theCUBE, SiliconANGLE's flagship program. We go out to the events and extract the signal from the noise at Dell EMC World 2017, our 8th year covering EMC World, first year covering now Dell EMC World is part of the combination. Our next guest is Dheeraj Pandey, who's the CEO of publicly traded Nutanix. Been on theCUBE pretty much every year since inception when they were just a startup, now a massively growing, now public company. Dheeraj, great to see you. Thanks for coming on and spending your time to come on theCUBE.
Pleasure.
So you're a public company. Can we still have the robust conversation? You have messaging, you got to stay tight on, you got to be careful, no forward-looking statements?
I think, fire away actually.
So okay, first question is, congratulations on the IPO, and you guys are growing now, your growth strategy's in full gear. Give us the update, because you now have competition behind you. Looking at you guys, wow, that Nutanix thing that we kind of dismissed in 2010 is actually played out, it's booming, you're successful. How are you keeping ahead of the competition? What's the expansion? What's the growth strategy?
And it's a great question, and by the way, it's been the same question every year. In 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, now 17. I have a favorite metaphor these days I tell people is like, you paint the Golden Gate Bridge, and you go back and start again, and you go back and start again, and you keep doing this actually. And that's the only way you'll actually be able to survive in this competitive landscape. So, on a journey that has no finish line. And as long as we keep looking at how happy our customers are, and what the retention rate is, what the repeat purchase pattern is, what the net promoter score is, and do the same thing for employees. How well are we able to retain them, and what's the net promoter score?
What's the headcount now for you guys, employee-wise? What's the employee headcount?
We're 2,700, around 2,700.
So I mean, it's big company, global. Painting the Golden Gate Bridge is not the same with 2,700 people, so how do you keep them agile? How do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them nimble?
And I think it's back to the leaders, and how can you get, because eventually if you have to scale this, you need to put enough leaders along the way, including the first line manager who needs to act like a leader, right? I mean, as opposed to being too myopic. And yet you have to have a 5-level deep relationship, using Slack and Twitter, and some of these social media tools are very good for us to even stay connected with people who are 4 levels deep from us, because that's the kind of personalization you need to do at 2,700 people.
What's the vision in terms of that reinvention, that entrepreneurial fire that you have, and I think this has been consistent. You look at Jeff Bezos at Amazon, I mean, he was still talking about his startup when he was driving the Chevrolet truck, bringing packages down the post office, his letter to shareholders, don't be irrelevant, got to stay relevant, but you still want to have that entrepreneurial spirit, but you got to have the growth. What's that next hill? What's the technology enabler? Is it more the same? Are you doubling down on your core technology? Where's your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, so as you see, initially we started out as an app on top of VMware, and in the last couple of years, been working for this for 4 years now, we said, look, we need to own our own stack. The whole stack has to be ours, and I think there's another 3 to 5 year journey just in that to make sure that the hypervisor, the storage stack, and the operations management, the systems management, the automation orchestration pieces, they all are elegant and scalable, and the way we actually thought it to be just for storage itself has to apply to all these layers. And then finally, I think one of the aha moments that we had last year was, how do you really converge? The only way you converge not just all the IT silos, but also build a bridge between IT ops and DevOps is by talking an application language. It's all about the app. It's not about compute, storage, networking, things like that. So then we started thinking about what's the right construct to really converge people. And I think that's when this Calm.io acquisition happened. We said, look, we need to start thinking about Calm as the blueprint for convergence in some sense. And now the company is thinking about the app more than ever before. It's all about the app, and app specification in a YAML language, and you're thinking about what does the compute get expressed as a VM or a container? Is it a web tier? What kind of operating system does it need? What kind of scale out policies will it have? What thresholds will you use? What does the middleware look like? What does the data tier look like? How do you bring dependencies between these tiers? What about the firewall, the load balancer? So you start thinking about working the whole body of this app itself, including micro-segmentation and things like that. So that's what's really driving the business going forward, that we are all thinking about convergence in a way that is more computer science-ish, as opposed to just, it's an informal word that is converging different layers of the stack itself.
So Dheeraj, painting the bridge one end to another, Nutanix is actually a pretty amazing company when you look at it from the outside in. You guys have taken the concept, HCI, and you've, from a company, talked to you guys on Twitter, they've moved away from HCI. They're talking about cloud and marching forward, but the enterprise doesn't move quite that fast. How is the conversation between you, and now that after the IPO, you're having much different conversations with different people, how have the conversations with the customer changed? Traditionally, infrastructure, VDI, specific use case has moved on to being a core builder of data centers, to now this relationship with developers. How has that conversation changed and challenged your team?
Yeah, it's a great question, by the way. If you look at the fundamentals of HCI, it's not about compute and storage coming together. It's about how you use homogeneous hardware to actually build everything on top of it. So, exactly like the way cloud companies think about racks and racks of servers and nothing but servers, and then all the layers of the data center become pure software. That is the true journey toward this enterprise cloud vision that we actually have. And in the first step of the journey, we said, look, we got to look at something that is extremely viscous, has gravity, is very static, and has stickiness: storage. Storage became the music to Nutanix, just like for Apple to converge something, they had to bring a phone and music together. And then everything else came on top of it, and that's what storage was to us, actually. But at the same time, we said, look, we have to be flexible. Obviously, when you talk about Twitter as an example, and not just that, Google and others, there are some apps where you just have blade servers and they have storage as a separate grid, and others where you need to keep them together and so on. And we had to think through that flexibility as well, that look, there are some apps that, just because of licensing reasons, you cannot virtualize them and you cannot run storage controllers on the same nodes where the Oracle license is used and so on. So we also were able to decouple it and say, look, we have the same software, like the way it runs on iOS and iPhone and iPod, the same software can actually light up a hyper-converged grid, but can also light up a storage grid that's serving all these physical applications as well. That's the beauty of the company and the product, that we've paid the architectural debt, but you don't need to have different operating systems for different kinds of use cases and so on.
You bring up the Apple thing, first of all, to quote Steve Jobs, the crazy ones often have changed the world. You did, you had a model, and we talked about 2010. I said to Dave Vellante and David Floyer, man, Nutanix, man, these guys, this is radical. If this plays out, it's going to be a game changer, and it did. So, but you mentioned music. Apple also radically changed the pricing of music, and kind of went from free, bootlegging it through P2P networks, to actually digitizing music, and monetizing the song.
99 cents.
So let's take your model forward. You need to think differently on pricing. You mentioned licensing, I get that company-wide, but how are you going to kind of unbundle pricing? Because that's also going to have to be innovated, match the technology innovation.
Absolutely, great
What
question.
is the business model innovation?
Well, I think the most important thing was to bite-size infrastructure. So you bite-size compute, you bite-size storage, you bite-size networks, microsegments, you overlay networks, things like that. You have to bite-size everything, and now you can charge for it. So I think we spent the first 7 years saying the fundamentals have to change first, and which is what Amazons of the world have to do as well. You cannot just create a cloud without thinking about paying the architectural debt, which is what they did with commodity servers, Zen hypervisor, EBS, S3, EC2 coming together, and then
so are you pricing differently?
So I think it's just, now that we're at Dell EMC conference, we talk about the cloud flex pricing, XC is a part of that pricing strategy as well. And we'll do similar things within Nutanix too. But the point here is not just how you were able to push hardware to a customer and say you can pay differently, because if it's not done at scale with enough efficiencies, it won't scale. What does it mean? You need to really have massive economies of scale where you're able to reuse all this stuff.
So flexible pricing, you're looking at it as flex, almost elastic pricing, if you will. That's the way you're thinking about it. Did I get that right?
Yeah, and also virtualize it, because at the end of the day, if you don't have good gross margins because you have all this underutilized hardware sitting at the customer, it's never going to be able to scale. So you have this fad of flex pricing, but it's not helpful at $1 billion actually. So when you start thinking about $1 billion worth of stuff, you need to start doing things in software. How often can you shuttle it back and forth from on-prem to back to a pool, from a pool? What kind of tools do you use to actually give it to a second customer, bring it back from there? There's a lot of this mobility stuff that you need to build before you say that this flex pricing can really work at scale actually.
So Dheeraj, we had David Flora on earlier today, and he was talking through how storage is the glue to hybrid cloud, multi-cloud. Nutanix is in a unique situation. You guys have been really aggressive with decoupling the platform. I think it's fair to call your solution a platform now, the platform from the hardware. As we look through cloud providers and such, how do you envision Nutanix being the core or the glue of that platform that I'm sure you envisioned 3 or 4 years ago?
Oh, that's a great point, by the way. So let me give you an analogy. The heart is storage, it's data, it's state. Brain is the compute piece. And the network is the spinal cord and the nervous system actually. All of these are equally important for a living being, and you need to, if you're doing a software-defined version of one, you need to do it for the other, with containers and virtualization of compute with VMs and such, and then the spinal cord and everything that comes with it. Is the network, and you talk about overlay networks and microsegmentation and things like that. They all are important glues for our lives actually. You can't just look at one and say this is it. Now it has to start with the heart. The heartbeat is where life begins. And state is where applications begin, but then there's a lot more that happens beyond that. So I think as a company we've built an end-to-end stack now. That doesn't mean that you can take our app and run it in a VMware stack either, or a Microsoft stack or something like that. Parts of our apps, just like Microsoft's apps can run in iOS and Mac OS and also run on Windows. I think we have taken that app strategy where we're saying, we can't have the platform hubris that stagnated Microsoft for 10 years actually, because it was an all Windows strategy, and everybody was paying the strategy tax of Windows, which stagnated them, it stultified them actually. And instead, we're saying if you have to learn some good lessons from Microsoft of the 2000s, what could we learn? We could say, well, we have a stack, it works pretty well, but our apps have to be portable enough to run on Windows and Mac OS and even Linux now. If you think about SQL Server, it runs on Linux.
I mean, Microsoft's lesson to be learned, I would say, is they didn't paint the Golden Gate Bridge over. They kind of relied on it, got a little rusty,
exactly.
And then didn't kind of make the pay it forward to themselves. And
everything was about Windows. Everything had to be about Windows. So we will never make it all about AHV. And I think all about Prism. Right now, Prism is an app to manage your data center, but we have APIs, so you can actually integrate with ServiceNow and different, even vCenter and vRealize automation and so on. I think we're taking an extremely API-centered view of things, and that's the way we build a huge moat of an operating system, because even the Microsoft of the 90s was all about APIs. They didn't have the best firewall, they didn't have the best malware scanner, they didn't have the best DLP software, the backup software, but they had the best operating system with the most robust and
they had a great developer network. The developer
network
network made them. They filled the white space in
and
for
how did the developer network come together? APIs.
Yeah.
Right?
And they gave them the latitude
APIs.
to fill the white space. Exactly. They nurtured their ecosystem. So on the growth strategy, that's a good segue to my next question, is as you guys grow, a lot of people who don't know the history go, okay, where's the growth strategy? They kind of squint through it. So I want to ask you, ultimately it's determined by the customers. So what are the key customer segments that you guys have now that can give the dots to connect for your growth strategy? What are your key customer segments?
I think the tactical 12 to 24 month is converge my teams. I have too much politics, and I think the app-centric view is going to help there a lot, because we have to reskill a lot of people. Think about it, the storage folks have to talk about the app blueprint. The networking folks have to talk about the app blueprint. The virtualization folks have to talk about the app. There's a lot of reskilling, and with an elegant one-click design, we can reskill a lot of talent actually. The most important thing, not just for a company and a customer, but for the industry in general. How do you elevate people is by bringing new constructs that helps them talk a different language actually. Java did this to developers, Ruby and Python did this to a lot of people as well. So that language actually has to be built in a different way. That's a 24-month kind of a roadmap for us. But then the other one that they're talking about is, okay, fine, we've converged all this stuff. Imagine it's going to work on-prem. How do I converge CapEx and OpEx together? Part of it is this cloud flex model that you heard about in this conference. But a big part of it is how do you take an autonomous data center that I run and someone else's data center and glue them together? Not just from storage point of view, but from networking and security and identity and even billing and metering and stuff. So there's a lot of that work that remains to be done actually.
Dheeraj, you're a fantastic entrepreneur and big cheerleader for your success. I'm not afraid to say that, even though we're independent media. I think it's okay to cheer for people that have done a great job in their journey. Also, we've been kind of critical of you guys in some cases, but congratulations, a great journey going public. I also was congratulating Mike Olson and Amr Awadallah at Cloudera, also friends as well. Boy, I've been critical of those guys, but it's okay to cheer public companies.
It's good to be, you're the fourth estate, so you have to be critical of...
but I think it's okay, the journalists, to cheer on a success as a milestone, not pump you up, but I think it's important as an IPO, as a milestone. I want to get your final thoughts on, final question, which is, a lot of people want to know what it's like to go public, and I was mentioning it to Mike Olson and Amr, ringing the bell at the stock exchange. It's a milestone, it's not the end of the journey. It's, again, painting the bridge, as you said, and things like that. What's it feel like to go public as an entrepreneur when you're mostly misunderstood, called the crazy one, the thing pans out, you grow in your team, it's a roller coaster.
Absolutely.
But it's a milestone, the IPO. What's it like, and share your thoughts to the people who have never gone public, always want to know what's it like to go public.
Yeah, I'll sound a little conceited or maybe even presumptuous or too ambitious, but when Amazon went public, it was a $700 million company. Oracle and Microsoft were sub-billion-dollar companies when they went public. Even when you look at the data points, we're probably as big as the Salesforce of 2006, VMware of 06, in that sense. EMC, Cisco of 94, Oracle of 89, Microsoft of 89, 90.
Pre-growth.
Yeah, in terms of growth and where they were in 89, 90, or 94.
If you bought stock at Cisco in 94, you're on the beach right now.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that we will become one. I think there's a rite of passage.
That's a forward-looking statement by me, not by you.
Well, that's the ambition of the company. It's like every decade and a half, there's a new operating system that emerges. The question is, can we be the operating system that actually straddles the clouds, where the cloud is a new motherboard? I think it's a massive opportunity. There's a lot to actually work on.
It's an accelerant too. It's really like moves things on.
Absolutely.
And your feelings of going public, milestone for you, just another day in the life?
Yeah, we just cash in the bank. The fact that the worst is not bad enough because we have all this cash. Now we have to use it conservatively and efficiently. But now if you can focus on delight on one hand and waste, companies that do a great job of delight and waste become large companies.
Well, certainly now the data is transparent, so puts more pressure to execute and rally the team. Congratulations on all your success. Dheeraj Pandey here inside theCUBE, CEO of Nutanix. I'm John Furrier, Keith Townsend. Keep it here. Dell EMC World 2017, more CUBE coverage. Stay with us after this short break.